Stitch Cuties, I'm Brittany with Stitches of Love Quilting, and in this video tutorial, I am going to give you tips and tricks for making your little Garden Wellies pincushion. I want to thank you for being a member of the Garden Moments Block of the Month. If you're watching this video and you're not yet a member, I highly encourage you to join. You get to make this beautiful quilt behind me, and when you join, you get to choose between Sewing Machine Applique and Embroidery Machine Applique. This video tutorial is specifically going to be all about the Sewing Machine Applique version and specifically the free welcome kit that you get in the mail. So let me show you what you get in this adorable kit. So this is the kit that you get in the mail in a fun little welcome package. You can see it has a nice picture of the project for you. And then you can see in the back you have all of your fabrics and your pre-fused laser cut applique pieces. So let's take this out. So you have your pre-fused laser cut pieces, which we'll work with in a moment. I'll set them to the side. This is your border fabric. Then you have the back of your pincushion, and then you have your background fabric that we're gonna do our applique on. And then let's take out our pattern. So right here you have a full color printed pattern with all of your instructions, and then we also give you bonus stitch tips in here from Julie. So you can see when you open it up, you have a welcome from myself and my mom, Julie. She's the designer of the quilt here at Stitches of Love Quilting. We give you some recommendations on your threads. We then encourage you to read through your entire pattern. So we're going to work through most of the pattern in the video, not all of it, because it would be boring to watch me sew the whole thing. So we're gonna prep our fabric, cut our fabric, and then we'll get into building our applique units, which I think is a very important thing. And then you'll notice in our patterns that we're giving you the stitch order and the thread color, so you can just follow along and stitch with that. And then finally you will assemble your pincushion. But if you turn the page one more time, you can see in the back of this pattern, we give you tips on selecting your favorite buttonhole stitch if you want to do a stitch that we use, which is where the buttonhole stitch, some people call it a blanket stitch. And then we give you some tips on technique. Pivoting and knowing the rhythm of your machine is very important. And then of course, we give you recommended notions, which I'll talk about in this video as well. I like to use what I call the perfect stack. I always have this when I'm doing Sewing Machine Applique, and I have almost the exact same stack in front of my embroidery machine when I'm using my embroidery machine to do a project. So overall, what I like to have, starting from the ground up, I have, and I accidentally turned it on, I have my Caterpillar Premium Glow Light Pad. What I love about it, it's in my stack, so I'm not gonna pull it out. Well, I can show you right here. Let's unearth my stack, if you will. So right here, what I love about this, it's very, very thin. It can be cordless. I happen to have it plugged in at the moment. But there are 3 levels of light. And what I love about this is that this comes with a cutting mat that fits the light portion of the light pad. It's a self-healing cutting mat that comes with it. And I really enjoy this cutting mat. I use it a lot. Something that I think is game-changing to applique is right underneath, and this is called the Appliqué glass mat. This is a piece of tempered glass that again fits on your light pad perfectly, and it can be ironed on. So when we're building our applique units, you're gonna see that I'm able to iron directly on that. Once I have all my pieces in place though, I like to do a final press over on my Steady Betty. This is, I think what I have in front of me is actually the 13 by 17 Steady Betty. If you watch some of our quote unquote older tutorials, I have a 12 by 16 Steady Betty that I've used for years and years and years and years and years. They're fantastic. You buy one, they last forever. And then another thing that we use in our perfect stack is our fusing mat. I love the 12 by 18 size. You can see kind of a theme. They all fit in a perfect stack. So that is why I love them so much. When we build our applique units, we're gonna work with this quite a bit. And then let's talk about scissors and a few other little things I like to have on hand. These are my Karen K. Buckley scissors. They're serrated and they're sharp all the way to the tip. If you can only get one pair, I would get the medium pair. This is large Medium is just a smidge shorter, but the medium works great on large pieces, small pieces, no matter what you're cutting. And then there's also a third size that's small that I really enjoy having for hand embroidery and things like that. So medium is my favorite size if you had to pick just one, but this happens to be the large size because it's what was sitting by my machine. Things that I also like to have, so I have my Alex Anderson 4-in-1 tool. I use this really more with my embroidery machine, but I do sometimes use it when I'm doing a sewing machine applique project. Hopefully you never have to use it, but it does have a seam ripper. It's got this nice pressing point. You've got the little thing where you're turning. Well, we will use this to turn. I like having that. And then the stiletto, of course, helps when you're working with little pieces. A few writing devices I like to have on hand. I like to have my Pigma pen. This gives really nice accent lines. And then I have my Sewline chalk pencil, which again, there's times where I like to use this over this one. It just really is a personal preference when I use it. What I'm going to use in the video today is going to be the Pigma pen to mark an accent line. And then we have the friction pen. I love this because it disappears with heat, but again, you can't use it all the time. Like I can't use it to mark my applique lines on my applique pieces because I'm then gonna iron my pieces and my line would disappear. So that's why I'm gonna use my Micron today. So, and I will say, I guess really where I like to use my Sewline pencil the most is when I'm marking like diagonal lines when I'm piecing and things like that. But nonetheless, I always have them with me. And then of course, you're gonna have your stabilizer when you sew. This is my Sulky Tear Easy stabilizer. I use the same stabilizer for either sewing machine applique projects or embroidery machine projects. I don't know how they do it where it is like sturdy, but yet tears away really easily. It's baffling to me because it looks like, and it kind of feels like it wouldn't tear away great, but man, I love the stabilizer. It tears away so beautifully. I love it, love it, love it. And once I've started using this, I've never gone back to anything else. It's worth it. And I like to buy, this is the 12-inch wide roll, and then it's 11 yards long, so you get 33 feet. So one roll, if you're doing sewing machine applique, is more than enough for 1 to possibly 3 block of the months, just depending on which ones you're doing with us. And then let's get started. Oh, of course, I like to have a ruler and rotary cutter with me for when I'm trimming. And then I like to have starch. You can use fancy starch. These are just like the $1 or $2 cans of regular sizing or spray starch, and I love it. I like my fabric to be almost like paper, which you'll see. Another thing that you get in your pattern and you'll have in every block of your block of the month guide is a full size placement guide. You're always gonna have your outer trim line, and then the inner line is always gonna show you where your seam ultimately is gonna be. And so in this one, your applique piece, the brown dirt, if you will, underneath your Garden Wellies, it's gonna go into the seam. So this is showing you that your applique piece is gonna go into the seam. And then even though you have your laser cut pieces in your kit, we give you the pieces reversed and numbered. We're gonna actually use these numbers in just a moment. And this is so that if you wanna do the project again and cut the fabrics yourself, you certainly can. So what we're gonna do first is get started with our fabric prep. And I'm showing the details of the fabric prep in this video because it'll apply to everything we're doing in the Garden Moments block of the month the entire time. You do not have to choose, of course, to starch your fabric or what have you. You're definitely gonna have to press it before you use it. But I do just wanna touch on the fact that I starch a lot. And let me tell you why. Here, I'll go back so you can see me. It's kind of boring to watch me just iron. But when you starch your fabric, it's basically, just think of it like gluing the fibers of that fabric together. And that way you don't have any pushing or pulling of the fabric when you're piecing, and it truly does improve your accuracy, even on something as simple as this, where really you're just sewing on 4 borders. Accuracy isn't, it's not a block that's gonna go in part of a larger quilt, as special as Garden Moments. It's just gonna be one pin cushion, right? But every seam matters, so you wanna make it good. And to me, it's a good habit to just get used to starching everything. And something I love to do is starch and iron fabric. I'm working on a project right now for fun with my mom in the evenings when we sew just for fun, like on a Sunday afternoon. And the fabric that I just started using, I actually starched and pressed at the beginning of COVID when the lockdown first started. And I was like, I need to just do something that's calming and relaxing and I don't have to think. And so I had a whole fat quarter bundle of fabric and it was fig tree fabric, and I just starched it one afternoon. And that was my, my calming, relaxing time. So you can see my fabric. It's still, you know, I mean, it's still fabric. I didn't turn it into paper, but it's a lot more stable. And so it's going to be easier to work with than, say, the piece that isn't starched. So let's just go on and finish. So this is, by the way, we're going to cut as we go. This is our applique background fabric, the white with the X's on it. This is called cross stitch fabric from Lori Holtz, and this is the tea rose color. It's ready to use. We're going to trim it later. So you're just going to iron this one and use it as is. The next piece we're going to starch. This is our, oh, well, technically, yes, this is the backing fabric. We're going to trim this to 6.5 inches square when we're ready to use it. See, I get it wet, like, and there's all kinds of different, like, people have all kinds of methods on starching. A lot of people, I know, if you're doing like a bunch of fabric, they'll get like a big bucket or a tub in the garage and just like literally let their fabric soak, or fill your tub and soak it. I don't quite go that extreme, but there's nothing wrong with it. Get your technique that you like to do and do it, basically. But I would recommend, like on this project, right, we're gonna do it all at one time. When you get into your blocks every month, I would recommend that you stay consistent in how you're starching throughout the entire process, just so when you go to piece the entire quilt together at the end, all of your pieces are the same consistency, if you will. So I think that makes it a lot easier. Oh, one thing I didn't mention that I'm using, you saw me ironing. This is the Steam Fast Travel Iron. These little guys are fantastic. They're troopers. They get hot so fast. They keep working forever. It's really lovely. So that, and you iron, when you're doing the starch, you iron it all the way until it's dry. Some of you are like, yeah, Brittany, you starch. It's important, and I'm gonna make my life easy and starch it all while we're just sitting here chatting. Now, the pincushion instructions that we give you in your starter are based just off of exactly how Mom made the welcome kit. And so on hers, she didn't quilt the pincushion. So when you get to the point of right before you do your stitching, if you want, you can go in and add your borders on then, and then you can put a piece of fusible batting behind the entire front of your pincushion. You'd want a 6-inch square centered, because you don't want that batting to go into your seam allowance, because they'll just make for a bulky project. But if you want, you can, as you applique, quilt your pincushion. If you don't want to quilt it and save time, like how Mom did on the sample, she didn't quilt it, and we've been using the pincushion in the sewing room here. It's fine without it being quilted. You don't have to, you'll do it just like the pattern. And one thing to keep in mind, you can make this project yours in any way. So like, of course, we're going to tell you what colors we stitched where throughout the entire process. We are going to give you recommendations of what we did, but there are no quilt police. You will hear us say that in a lot of tutorials. You make this project how you want it. So if maybe you don't like the buttonhole stitch, maybe you love to do just the straight line applique, a straight edge, 1/8 of an inch in on your applique pieces, because that's, well, it's fast and it's easy and it's fun to do. And it looks great. You can do that. So no one is saying that you have to do it exactly how we do. Another thing is you can choose to, a lot of quilts, Mom used to do it a lot. She doesn't do it as much anymore. You can stitch all of your applique in one color, maybe all white, maybe all black. That is up to you. We are going to give you in the pattern an example that matches exactly what we did, so that you can make the quilt look just like what you signed up for. But again, customize it and no one will be the wiser, and it will be your beautiful masterpiece. So don't let any quilt police come into your mind. Okay, so now that we have this nice and starched, we're going to trim just like the pattern says. So I'm gonna set the background aside, right? Because this will be trimmed after we do the applique. What we're gonna do is move our Steady Betty and our fusing mat aside. I'm gonna get to where I have my cutting surface. And what I need to do is cut this down to 6.5 inches square. So what I'm gonna do first is take one line and I'm gonna just cut one straight line, right? And then from there, we'll have a straight edge line to work with. Now the X's do kind of go in a line. So if I look at my ruler, I can see that they're all pretty straight. Because even though it's not a directional fabric, I do somewhat want to pay attention that it's not like totally wonky, if you will. So now I'm ready to cut my next edge. I'm just gonna go all the way up to the edge. And basically I'm creating a 90-degree angle here to work with. And then my next 2 cuts will be where I get my measurement just right. Let me make sure, oh yeah, I'm in the camera. You can see this nicely, I hope. And my elbow, I have this turned where my arm can hit the light. Sometimes that's helpful. Sometimes I recommend just turning it where your switch is on the other side. So like I said, we're doing 6.5 inches. So now right here, these are the 2 lines where I've cut. And so I will take my ruler to 6.5, and at the bottom, I will have 6.5. See, so I'm at 6.5. And then all the way up, I want to make sure that my lines are consistent and my lines are consistent on the bottom so I can cut this off and keep these scraps. You never know when you're going to do something that you will want that for. As Mom says, there's no scrap too small to keep. I would differ. There's some I do throw away, but you know. They do look really cute in jars, by the way. You just take a jar and slowly put all your scrap trash in there. It really does make cute decor, I must say. Okay, so now you have your perfect 6.5 inch background square. Easy peasy. Another recommendation I have, and again, I'm doing a lot of information in this first video that's maybe not relative to the pin cushion, but you can apply it to the rest of the quilt. I like to use the same rulers throughout an entire project. I happen to have just several rulers that match. They're all the Omni Grip. You can use whatever brand, whatever ruler, but I think saying consistent makes it consistent. Even though you would think all rulers are the same, they're not necessarily all the same. So then from here, we're gonna cut this to 1 inch, the whole strip down to 1 inch, and then we're gonna do 2 at 1 by 5.5 and 2 at 1 by 6.5. Because of the space, I'm on my little cutting mat, I'm gonna do my 5.5 and my 6.5 inch cuts first, and then we'll trim it down to the 1. So what I'm gonna do is use the lines on my cutting mat, and I'm gonna try and get my stripes straight, if you will. They're not gonna be perfect, just because fabric inherently, you know, moves, as they say, but it's pretty close. So I'm not lining up any of the cut edges. I'm lining up my stripe fairly accurately. So what we're gonna do is just give a cut right here. And then, so we have to do 2 at 5.5 and 2 at 6.5. My fabric is folded, right? So I'm getting 2 at one time. So there's half, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 right here. And then we will carefully move our ruler and go over 5.5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5. And right here is where I want to switch to a thinner ruler. Again, same brand. So my cut is here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5. And we will do a cut. I wiggled my fabric ever so bit. So slightly, did y'all see that? I saw it wiggle. So I'm just gonna check. Yep, I'm still good. There we go. So now I can trim this down to 1 inch wide. And again, you have tons of fabric left over, something fun you can find to do that with. And if you want, you can stack your fabric. You by no means do not have to. And what I'm going to do is just use the top and bottom cut line to line up with my ruler. See, so what I'm lining up with is not my cutting mat underneath. I'm using the straight lines here and the straight line here, the cuts that we did, to line up. And then we'll make a turn and we'll do our 1 inch. When you turn, you want to be careful not to move the fabric. And so I'm doing 1 inch because we end up with just a 1/2 inch of that border showing. So careful not to move your fabric like I just did. And Perfect. So I have my straight line right down here on the left. It's straight right here, straight right here. All right, and again, we gave you way more fabric than you need. This is actually what we're throwing out or putting aside is actually more than what you even needed. So now we have our cute little border strips. Are they not adorable at just an inch? I love it. Because see, all it shows in the end is a 1/2 inch little finished border. Super cute. Okay, so now we've done the prep work. Now it's time to start our applique, which is of course the most fun part of it all. Let me put my rulers away over here. So with the applique, the instructions are going to coach you on, of course, creating your perfect stack. We remind you of the recommended notions every month in the pattern. And then we recommend that you identify and number each piece. Now I will tell you, when you get into the project and you start working with it a lot, you'll probably stop numbering your pieces because you just, with applique, especially like on some of the simpler blocks, you can just see it and you know what the pieces are. And something like this, we have a lot of yellow polka dots. So I can tell you the full circle polka dots are all the exact same size, but then you have your little cutoff circles. They're obviously different, so that helps a lot to number those. So while I don't always number all of my applique pieces, let's do that in this tutorial, just so you can build that habit. And then of course, we wanna always make sure that we give you as much information just in case this is your first time doing applique. It's so much fun. If it is, I hope that you get addicted. So what I'm gonna do is simply take my Pigma pen, and it's very easy to identify some of the pieces. Obviously, this is my flower, and so it is number 19. And I can tell you, look, see the direction this is pointed right here? It's the same direction over here, but reversed, right? See? So what you can do while it's over here, you can draw an arrow pointing up, so that when I peel the backing and build my unit, I know which way is up. And so I don't do that thing where I turn my piece a lot, which when you watch the tutorials, I do that a lot because I tear all I peel all the backing off first. So I'm not gonna peel my backing, I'm gonna do that as I go. Now, some of the pieces, to make sure they were accurate in your kits, we put them together. So you see, you just have a little baby bit of fabric that you will cut with your Karen K Buckleys. So let's just do that on a couple pieces. And then when it comes to the yellow, I'm going to show you a trick. We're not going to take the yellow apart until as we're placing it, because they're all so different. And then let's do our pinks. And you have your flower center right here. See, this is why I love these scissors. See how they're sharp all the way to the point? And then you just snip your piece here. And I can tell you, so when we're making our pre-fused laser cut applique pieces, everything is professionally pressed, all the fabric is. And then from there, it's fused on big professional or industrial, whichever word you want to use, heat presses. So they're consistent throughout, and every single piece you get will have been pressed the exact amount of time. Okay, so let's continue identifying our pieces. So these are your upright pieces. These are your reversed. So you're going to want to use your reversed so that you can mark on your applique piece what number it is. So we have 17 and 18. Get my lid off. And then these pieces are pretty self-explanatory. Piece number 2, piece number 7, piece number 1. But again, some months the pieces are very, very different. Some months they're very similar. So I think this is a good practice to do, especially if you're new to applique. And then, so these are all identified. Now we have our yellows. Let me show you a little trick. When you reverse this, look at that. This same little layout right here is the same layout we took to the laser. Nice, right? So you can truly just go in numerical order and write 4, 9, 11, 12, 14, 3, 5, 8, 10, 13, 15. All right, cool. So now I have everything numbered. We can start building some units. I love it. I'm gonna put all my pieces aside. Normally I have a little trash bowl, but my trash bowl seems to have walked away which is not good. So let's put our pieces to the side. And what we're gonna do is look at our pattern and see what it wants us to do first in terms of building a unit. So to build a unit, what I'm gonna do, let's prep our space. I'm taking away my cutting mat and I'm bringing in my fusing mat. So what I have in my perfect stack, turn my light pad on, I'm going to have my applique guide underneath. So I have my I have my light pad, my glass mat, placement guide, fusing mat. Easy peasy. And now, what does our pattern want us to do? Our first applique unit is pieces 2 through 6. I got it. Let me show you what that is. So we're gonna build this little portion, this right portion of our boot. So we have 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Easy peasy. So 2, and then we are going to cut out our little circles. 3, 4, 5. There's 3 little circles we're trimming out. And I'm just trimming this because they're so small as I go, as I need them. So I don't have to worry about losing a piece. And again, once you get like really comfortable with what you're doing and you're past confident beginner, then you don't have to necessarily do this step, but I want to show it to you just so you know it. What I like to do is put my little pieces in a little numerical order, especially when I'm doing the embroidery machine. Oh my goodness. So 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then I don't have to think about messing up, right? If I talk and blah, 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 it's gonna be okay. So what we're gonna do is put our piece right in place. And you'll notice that your fusing mat kind of has like a tacky feeling to it, right? Like it's kind of like bloop, bloop, bloop. You can feel it. That's so helpful in holding your applique piece. There we go. Now piece number 3 is right here on the side. Now let's see, can you see on the camera through my piece? Probably not as well as I can, but the edge of your circle is gonna line up perfectly with the edge of your boot, right? So I'm just gonna hold that there and then give it a press. I'm just using the tip of my iron. You can see my iron's kind of angled. I'm not ironing the whole piece because I don't want to overexpose the heat and bond light. It's pretty hard to do that, but it can happen. I haven't really ever had it happen, but I know that's real. Now we're gonna do number 4. You can see you have a full circle. It's going over the piece because, well, it's just easier, right? It's easier to work with that full piece and it gets buried under the next boot. And then we're gonna do number 5, which you can see right there. Let me just lift up and make sure. Whoop. Yep, I'm seeing it right. Just want to make sure. I don't want to make a mistake in a tutorial. And then get that right in place. It has just a bit of a curve, so you know you'll have it in the right place when it's following that curve of that boot. And you can see my fingers getting really close, right? That's when it helps to have this little wooden edge or open that up and get your stiletto out, because then you don't risk burning your finger. And sometimes I feel I'm steadier with my stiletto than like my actual finger. Sometimes it wants to wiggle. And then piece number 6. And again, we just need to iron where it overlaps. There we go. So cute. So we've built applique unit number 1. You can just leave it right there. I'm just gonna slide this over and we're ready to build our next unit. So what is our next unit? Let's do it by the books, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to now take pieces 7 through 16. So again, I'm gonna lay them out in order. So we have 7, and then we have all of our dots, right? And then 16 is the little bottom of our boot. So let's get these little guys freed out of here. So we have 8, 9. So I hope that you in your sewing room are just sewing along with me. Again, I'm gonna go pretty slow on this prep part here for you in this video, but the prep work stays the same for every single block, no matter how complicated or how big or how small or how not complicated the block is. Applique on any project remains the same. You just need to build your units and then go from there. It's always easy. And you know, a long, long time ago, well, 10 years ago, Mom would talk about units all the time. I was like, whatever, I don't see the hullabaloo of building an applique unit. Once you start doing it, you're like, oh, well, you know what? It's better to make a mistake on your fusing mat than on your fabric. Isn't that a novel idea? Okay, so what we're gonna do, I'm gonna kind of lay out where my numbers are, right? So we have 8, 9, 10 is over here, 11, 12. I just like to kind of visualize it. 13, and then 14 comes down here on the bottom, and 15 over here. Now, I don't want to get too close to where I'm going to iron, so I don't want to accidentally iron a piece. And a trick in removing, I already started peeling, but let me show you. To remove your white paper from your piece really easily, hold your piece fabric up, just pinch down on the corner, and look at that. Immediately releases. Really makes your life easy. So that used to be another thing I kind of struggled with, was removing the paper. But there's no need for that. So get that right in place. I'm going to start with number 8, which is right up here in the corner. Again, the edges of this are going to, see how it's curved? It's going to line up with your boot. So that's how you'll know you're in the right spot. And you just come right up to that edge. And again, just the tip of my iron is going on there. And then, sorry, that's my iron hitting my camera stand. And then let's make sure, yep, 9. And then I'm gonna be wild and put a few pieces down at one time. Come over here to number 10, right there. All right, so let's do this one in place. And number 10, again, it comes right up to that edge. And now we have 11. So easy. Don't you love doing this? 11. And then 12 is another whole one. It's down here, kind of on the toe-ish area of your boot. And so, press it. There we go. And now we have number 13. Just down here on the toe. And again, the curve on the outer edge of this piece is gonna line up. Oh, look at that, so perfect. I love it. It's kind of like applique by numbers. Well, not kind of, it really is like applique by numbers. So piece number 14, it's gonna be under the black part of your boot. So it goes off the edge just a little bit, because it's just easier to work with that full circle, then cut it down. And then finally piece number 15, and then we will put the bottom of our boot on. And then the next unit we're gonna build, and you can see this has like a little edge on the corner, which really helps you align that piece perfectly. And then piece number 16. And next we'll build our flower unit, which is 17 through 20. And again, this black piece right overlaps onto the boot. And we need only iron where it overlaps. So I'm just using the side of my iron. There we go. Cute, cute, cute. And you're like, hey, there's a big hole there. That's where your flower goes, don't worry. And now we just move this over. And this one's nice and easy because remember, we drew this arrow. So when I flip this over, I know that's my top. I can remove my paper backing and go right in there. Oh, but that's number 19. I gotta put 17 and 18 first. Well, y'all, we're probably sitting there and you're sewing her going, Brittany, don't forget a piece. I won't, don't worry. But again, if I would have, it's okay because I could have peeled it up and put the pieces down. Love building units. And number 18. Now, number 19. Look at that. Oh, let's move it just a little. And you can be as picky or as less picky as you want about building your units. I tend to be fairly picky because I want it to be right. But I don't sweat the small stuff, right? It's fun. And then simply our final piece of quote unquote building the units. We still have a piece left, don't worry, I didn't forget number 1. And we put our flower center right in the middle. Love it. Now before we go to the next step, I don't think I wrote this in the pattern actually. I am going to trace with my Pigma pen the accent lines. So when it comes to, here I'll switch back to where I can talk to you, hello. So what I'm going to do is trace the line that I'm going to stitch on my leaves. Now you don't have to do that. It's more than fine to just freehand that straight little or curved line of the accent of the leaf. You don't have to trace that. But I think it's a good habit again to get into of identifying where those accent lines are and tracing them. Let's see, are there a lot of accent lines in this? We're gonna have some accent lines like on our first block, the little bee legs, the bee eyes, the bumblebee lines. Mostly there on the gloves right here, there's gonna be some accent lines when we build our applique units. Overall, not a ton of accent lines, but a little bit. Some pieces, you know, have tons of them. Oh, actually all the leaves. Yeah, all these leaves will have accent lines. Okay, fair amount of accent lines. So let's just get in the habit of looking for those right now, and I will make sure I identify those in the pattern for you. I don't know that I told you to trace that in this pattern, but I'm telling you now. Here we go. I am going to simply trace the line very lightly, and then right there. I love it. So if you start to make a mistake, don't overcorrect because this is permanent. You don't want to do that, and you want to make sure when I stitch over this, I'm going to make sure I'm using my 30 weight thread just like I am for the applique. If you're using 50 weight thread only for your applique, you may want to stitch over that line more than once just to make sure you cover your drawn line. Again, that's why I like to use a really fine point Pigma pen on that process. So now what we're gonna do is take our little units. Look how easy that just peels right up. Look at this. Amazing. And just pick these little guys up. I mean, you just wanna be gentle with them. Whoop, don't throw it like I just did. And now we're ready. We're gonna move our fusing mat aside, and we are gonna take our background fabric. We're just gonna plop it right on top of our pattern. Now look, we gave you way more fabric than you need. See, we're gonna trim it to this outer trim line. So just position your fabric where you think you want it. Again, it's not directional, but I do kind of wanna make sure, like I don't wanna put it on there like this. Well, actually that's kind of cute. The fabric's cute no matter where you put it. But I do want my excess to kind of be fairly straight. Nothing crazy, but I also don't want it to be like right in a seam. Not to get like super weird. Oh my gosh, now I'm getting OCD about it. So what we're gonna do now is put all of our pieces and applique units in place. So first up, we're gonna put piece number 1 down here in place, just like so. And we're gonna press. Now I'm gonna press to adhere it to the fabric, and then you'll see in a second after we adhere everything to it, I'm then gonna move my Steady Betty on top of my surface and give it one final really good press, if you will. We're gonna take applique unit 1, and we will put it right in place. Let's see, I gotta wiggle it just a little. There we go. Give it a press. Now you don't want to pull your iron, you want to lift it. It might look like I just pulled, but I really didn't. You lift, because otherwise if you pull, you could end up distorting and pulling that fabric with you, which you don't want to do. And then number 2, which really what I'm going to use to line up is basically the top and left line right here. There we go. It's overlapping everywhere. It means I did good on building my units. And now we're gonna take our flower. And you can see that flower doesn't go onto the dirt, but it sure goes close. And so what I'm gonna use to line up here are my leaves. There we go. Oh my gosh, so cute. Isn't this adorable, y'all? I love it. I love it. So now, look at that. You are ready to stitch. So let's talk about stitching. So again, we did not quilt the sewing machine version of the pin cushion. So what you would do now is go to your sewing machine. Let me turn my light pad off. With your cute little piece, look at that, ready to go. And you are then going to take your stitch order guide and you're gonna stitch in the order. Now I'm gonna give you a fun little thing you can do if you want. You don't have to. If you want, you can go on and trim this and sew your borders on. And then you can put fusible batting behind this front. So you would trim this down, sew your borders on. So basically you're skipping to assembly, but you don't put the back on yet. And you could quilt this if you want. You would put the borders on, quilt the whole thing, and do your applique stitching all at one time. If you do that, you're not gonna put stabilizer behind the fusible batting. The fusible batting will act as your stabilizer for your stitching as well. But again, you don't have to quilt this. We didn't in the pattern because Mom/Julie, the designer, did not quilt hers. When we went to the embroidery machine, I am doing quilting for all of the embroidery files. So I did do quilting. So I'm just gonna give you an idea if you do wanna quilt, what it can look like. So I just did, yeah, I switched over here. I did a simple, look at that little fuzz, cross hatch. So if you're gonna do something like that, you can use your ruler and a friction pin to draw the lines. You can do a fun meander behind it. You can quilt it however you want. But again, this pin cushion does not need quilted and we don't in the pattern. Okay, so that was just a caveat. If you're new to doing this, do it exactly as the pattern says. If you're more advanced and you understand how to maybe skip around in a pattern, then definitely go on and do it your way. Okay, so again, I want to recommend that you use a 30 weight thread in your needle, a 50 weight thread in your bobbin that matches, and then you're going to use a, oh my gosh, what am I forgetting I'm forgetting the needle size. I just helped with orders downstairs and filled all the needles. Yeah, 90-14, okay. I was just doing a bunch with the 80-12 needles. I was like, oh my gosh. So the 90-14 needle, and the reason you wanna have that 90-14 needle is that the hole, the eye of the needle for your thread to pass through is just a smidge larger, right? It's a 90 instead of an 80. And so that means that that 30 weight thread passes through without any kind of breakage or shredding or anything like that. And it doesn't affect the tension on your sewing machine at all. You'll get beautiful stitches with that needle and thread combo. I do want to tell you in this thread kit, when you are stitching color number 1307 with the 30 weight in your needle, your thread kit, if you got the thread kits from us, there is no 1307 in sulky thread and a 50 weight. So you are going to use that 1256 pink and your bobbin anytime you're stitching 1307 in your needle. Those two pinks are close enough for sharing a bobbin together. However, on the stitching, you will notice throughout the quilt, it is better to have 1307 and 1256. They work better in different cases. But for your bobbin, you're going to use 1256 in the bobbin for both of those colors, 1256 and 1307. If you have any questions about that, always just visit our website, stitchesoflovequilting.com, click on support. You can submit any kind of question and Ariel and Kathy will answer you. Or if they don't know the answer, they come get me and Mom and we answer, but they pretty much know all the answers. Okay, so now I'm going to give you some stitch tips on just things to kind of think about when you're stitching. And I'm going to use my sample here. So let's switch over. So again, this is from my embroidery machine, but I digitized the files to look exactly like Julie's stitching. So this looks exactly like her stitching. So I just want to point out some things. So I use the exact same size stitch on all of my pieces except in one place. When you're doing a project, you can change up your stitch length and width and get different looks. And you can pick that. I highly recommend that you use the stitch tips in here and play with some scrap fabric to see what you like in your stitch size. And then once you kind of get some favorites, what Mom does is she makes a little, basically like a little post-it note, cute little post-it note, and she sticks it to the side of her machine for a project. So say that you love 2x2 for your stitch width and length on this project, put that either in your little binder for garden moments or put on the side of your machine. And just remind yourself so that if you get behind or you don't touch the project for a minute and you go back to get your stitch width and length you've forgotten, just write it down. That makes it easy, right? Keep notes or keep notes on your phone. I have notes on my phone about, gosh, everything in my life. I would forget where I work probably if I didn't write it down. No, not really. Okay, so I recommend that you follow the stitch order, and what you're gonna do, if you look at your placement guide, we basically start at 1 and work our way up. But once you have a color of a certain thread on your machine, why change spools? So you'll do what, like, let's say we get to number 2, pink. We're not gonna say, oh, I'm then gonna change to yellow and blah, 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 blah. You're gonna do everything that is that pink at one time to keep your life easy. So in theory, you go from bottom layer all the way to the top in numerical order, but let's not change our thread a million times. So we're going to stitch the brown first. Then we're gonna come over and do the pink on the boots and then the flower center. Then we're gonna do all the fun yellow dots with our butterfly gold. Then we are gonna come over here and do, oh, I almost forgot the black. So this fabric isn't black, it's actually charcoal, but it looks great with that, the dimension that the black adds right here on the stitching. So you'll stitch the black on your boots. And then you go to avocado 1177, do your flowers. Again, when you stitch on your accent line, make sure that you're covering that line really well. If you go off while you're stitching, you don't cover the whole thing, do a second line right beside it, and it'll just look like you meant to. And then finally, we're gonna finish off that 1256. Again, when you're doing the 1307 in your needle, you're gonna put the 1256 bobbin in, just because they don't make 1307 in a 50 weight. So you can, that bobbin color is fine because it's not gonna show. It's better than using a white bobbin. Okay, any other stitch tips? Oh, I do wanna make sure I point out right here. So between the yellow dot and the pink flower, take a look, right? That is a little space. And so the stitch size that we used right here, if we were to stitch that, your machine is gonna give you probably only 1 stitch, maybe a second stitch that goes a little onto your flower, which would make you probably a little upset. So what we did right here, I actually ended up getting 3 stitches. I took my width down to like 1.5 or 1.8, and I took my bite in. I left my bite in at the same, but I took that width between stitches way smaller so that I could make sure that my piece was stable and secure. If you had just 1 stitch here, likely you would end up just, I mean, the piece, I don't know, I feel like the thread would come out. It just wouldn't make me happy. I like to have at least a couple, 3 stitches or so on a piece. Now, another thing when you're looking at your stitch tips, Mom kind of talks about going around a circle. You want to make sure that you don't have, you want to make sure you pivot, right? You want to keep your needle in the needle down position, and you're going to raise and lower that foot and move your piece. So as you're coming around the bend, if you will, let's say you're stitching the pink, and you're coming around the bend, when you get down here to this point, keep your needle in the needle down position. Lift your presser foot, and you are going to turn this little guy. And as you start to curve, you're gonna keep pivoting. So I would pivot again about here. I would pivot again about here. So basically every 3 or 4 stitches on a curve of this size, I would pivot and pivot and pivot and pivot. Now, when you're doing this little yellow circle, you're gonna pivot a lot. If you look on our YouTube channel, and we have, I'll put a link to it in this video description, we have a series where Mom is showing, I believe it's red holly berries, or something circular that she's showing you how to stitch on, and it's really helpful, I think, when you're working on small little pieces. And then, of course, you're gonna pivot a lot on your little flower. This is just great practice. When you're doing the pink and stuff, you're kind of gonna sail through a bunch of it. It's gonna be pretty easy on the brown. So really, I would say the most challenging part would be just going around those circles and making sure that you don't get, if you don't pivot, what's gonna happen is all your stitches are gonna start looking slanted. If your stitches are looking slanted, it's telling you that you're not pivoting enough. And then this little diagram right here is just showing you, if you pivot during a bite in, what happens is you get a V. So you only wanna pivot when you're in the straight side. So the machine goes straight, bite in, bite out. Or you could have it go straight, bite in, bite out. Sometimes you have 3 stitches between. That's up to you on your, as you are picking your favorite stitch. But you wanna make sure you're not going backwards in your stitch, and you wanna make sure that you do pivot, and that you pivot at the right time. You pivot during the straight stitch, and keep that needle down position. I really like to, we get a lot of questions about what sewing machine we recommend, especially for embroidery machines. We get that question all the time. And to me, it's really just about a few features that I recommend. I don't think I could sew with a foot pedal anymore, just because I've gotten so used to the push button. And although it's weird to start using that push button if you've always used the foot pedal, it's gonna feel strange to, you know, push the button so frequently and things like that. But you ultimately end up with way more control. Now, one thing Mom likes to do in Sewing Machine Applique is have a knee lift. I, for the life of me, cannot master the rhythm of the button and the knee lift. I can't do video games either. I have no eye-hand coordination, I think. But try that. If you haven't tried your knee lift, it is really helpful because the knee lift is lifting your presser foot, which when you get into the rim would make it a lot easier in pivoting and doing your applique. So try those things on your machine. If your machine doesn't do it, maybe you have a friend that you can try it on their machine. But certainly any sewing machine that has your favorite applique stitch on it, that's all you need. You don't need all the crazy fancy machines, but they're really fun, so do get them. Let me see, any other tips I can share? Oh, well, just to tell you how you're gonna assemble it, you will then, once everything is put together, you've trimmed it down, blah, 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 you're gonna marry them right sides together, do a 1/4 inch seam, but you're gonna leave the bottom open about 3 inches or so that you can turn it right side out, and then you can fill it. So what we filled ours with, it's called crushed walnut shells. The most cost-effective way to get those is to go to a pet store in your area, and it is oftentimes used for like reptiles and lizards and stuff. So ask for that in the pet department and you can get like huge bags. I mean, you don't necessarily need that much, but if you're gonna do a bunch of fun projects, if you're gonna do a bunch of stitches of love block of the month and you make a pin cushion every time you start a new one, you might need a bag that big. But I really like this heavy pin cushion. But a tip when you're going to sew that close, so this is filled to about here with that lizard litter, crushed walnut shells. And then at the end, Mom put in wool roving, or you could use polyfill or what have you. And then we whip stitch it closed. But what's great about having that little barrier of just that little bit of fluffy stuffing of roving or polyfill is that one, it's easier to hold right there, right? Because that is squeezable, whereas the lizard grit is not squeezable. And so it's easier to sew, and then also it's gonna prevent anything from ever somehow slipping through your stitching, which I've never had that happen, but it could. You don't wanna turn it over and have all that crushed walnut shell falling out. I do like how heavy this is, but again, you can stuff it with anything. One thing that we do when we're, if we're gonna use something like a polyfill or what have you, you can go to like a Walmart or Target or whatever and buy like a super cheap pillow. This is really good if you're stuffing something really big. You can get a super cheap pillow for what, like $5 or something. A lot of times that ends up being cheaper than actually buying the bag of polyfill or whatever it is. Nothing against polyfill, we just got some in, we love it. Mom just ordered like big boxes just for her use. But yeah, it's great to just grab or even if you have an old pillow, grab it, cut it open and put it in your pin cushion. Okay, now I'm rambling about filling. So any other tips I wanted to make sure I mentioned? I think that is all of it. Okay, so now this was your welcome kit. These are your stitch tips. Visit the other video tutorials that we have. Specifically, I'm gonna share links in this video tutorial to a mug rug playlist that we have that has great applique tips on it, and it's Julie stitching, Mom stitching, and she's just the best. And then I'm also going to share a link to our Bloomin' Basics stitch along series that we did in 2021. We do a lot of applique stitch tips, and we talk about our perfect stack and our notions and things like that. Mom does more in depth, I believe, too, about talking about her threads and her needles and things like that. So if at all during the process of your Garden Moments block of the month you have any questions at all, do not hesitate to reach out to us. We are always here. I will tell you, we are not going to answer in the middle of the night. We're not going to answer on the weekends. We all go home and sleep and have personal lives outside of work. So anytime Monday through Friday, you're going to get an answer very, very, very quickly. If you email in the evening or on the weekend, it's going to be the next business day that we get back to you. But if you don't mind, when you do reach out to us, please let us know your name and your email address so we can help you and look up your account. If you happen to have more than one email address, if you don't mind just like double checking in your account which email address you used when you signed up, it helps us find your account even faster and get back with any kind of answers that you may need. I think that is everything for today. If there are anything that I didn't cover in the tutorial, just comment, let me know. I'll be able to answer there as well, or I'll make sure to include it in the future tutorials, or maybe I've already answered it in another tutorial and I'll share it there. I do want to thank you for being a member of the Block of the Month. It means so much to us. All of us have so much fun, all the way from lasering the pieces to cutting the fabrics to folding it to putting it in your boxes. The design process ahead of time when Mom is designing it. It's a really fun process for us, and hopefully that translates into every box that you get. I can't wait for you all to get your first box after you have your welcome kit. I hope you're excited to sew it. These boxes, I say it for every Block of the Month, how can they get cuter and then somehow they just keep getting cuter? I can't even. I love these boxes so much. Yeah, I could say they're slightly collectible in my mind. We get a lot of comments from you all that you like stack them all up, and I love that. I think that's fun. Okay, thank you so much. If you have any questions, reach out. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Share how much you love the Stitches of Love Block of the Month with your friends so they can join in on the fun too. And happy stitching!